Democratic presidential candidate Senator Cory Booker was recently doing some campaigning in Iowa and fielded a question about legalizing cannabis and nonviolent cannabis arrest.
In lieu of certain states trying to make weed a recreational drug, how do you feel about nonviolent criminal offenders? What is your viewpoints on that?
So a lot of people have a very different perspective on marijuana than I do. And when I was in Stanford, people smoking weed and not having any worries about what effect it might have in their lives. We have presidential candidates and congresspeople and senators that now talk about their marijuana use almost as if it's funny. But meanwhile, in 2017, we had more arrests for marijuana possession in this country than all the violent crime arrests combined. And what happens to people who are arrested for marijuana? First of all, who gets arrested? Poor people, and way disproportionately people of color. There's no difference in America between blacks and whites for using marijuana or even selling marijuana, but blacks are about 4 times more likely to be arrested for it. And so in Newark, the margins for error for my kids to experiment with drugs like people often do, that margin is not there. And then one kid gets one charge for possession of marijuana for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. And what happens to their lives? They come out, the American Bar Association calls it 40,000, they use a fancy word, collateral consequences. Well, what does that mean? That means there are thousands of things you can't do for the rest of your life. You can't get many jobs in America. In Newark, you can't even get a job at a Burger King if you've had a previous criminal conviction. You can't get business licenses. You can't get a public housing. You have all of these things that for the rest of your life you can't do because you have a nonviolent drug charge. And so I'm all for legalizing marijuana. I have the premier bill in the Senate to do it. But you know what my bill says? It doesn't say just that we should deregulate marijuana on the federal level. We should make it legal, let the states do what they want. But it doesn't stop there, because do not talk to me about legalizing marijuana unless in the same breath you talk to me about expunging the records of the millions of people that are suffering with not being able to find a job. And then on top of that, people who are in prison should be able to petition their way out under the new laws. And more than that, all of this tax revenue that we're going to get from marijuana should be reinvested in those communities that have been disproportionately targeted by the war on drugs.
So Cory Booker, this was something that he added on to in a recent interview with Chris Matthews on MSNBC. This was actually just Monday night. And he said, quote, "We have presidential candidates, senators bragging about their pot use while there are kids who can't get a job because they have a nonviolent offense." I think this is a very strong tactic from Senator Cory Booker, because he's actually dealing with this issue with the seriousness that it calls for. To see somebody like Kamala Harris when she was on the Breakfast Club during that interview, which was just a few weeks ago, and her laughing about her marijuana use while she was in college, and to know that after that marijuana use, or after that supposed marijuana use in college, she went on to become a DA in San Francisco. She went on to become an attorney general. And effectively, she charged many people, many poor people, with marijuana possession. So, and that speaks to the privilege that her and many other people all across this country have, that many others don't, like all these people that are in jail for marijuana possession. So I like that Cory Booker talked about that, again, with the seriousness that it deserves, and that he pointed to that if you're talking about marijuana legalization, don't talk about that isolated in and of itself. You also have to include that you need to expunge the records of everybody that has been convicted of these nonviolent drug arrests as well.
I will say, and I do hate to say this, just looking at how Cory Booker answered that question, I have to agree with him. Now, obviously, I'm compartmentalizing my outlook on Cory Booker. And just kind of relegating my opinion to just this matter, and I do think that's important. Obviously, we don't like Cory Booker, and we've had some very colorful things to say about him. But in this case, you can't deny he has the right answer. I still don't forgive him for corrupting Rosario Dawson. That's still on the table, Mr. Booker. But you did have a good answer here, and I do think it's in bad taste for our representatives, especially candidates, to tout their use of marijuana and kind of talk about it very frivolously, because I think Hillary Clinton did that too.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton did it too, kind of. He did it subtly.
He didn't inhale.
He didn't inhale. So
Right.
his wasn't very jovial.
No.
Barack Obama did it too, but his wasn't as jovial as Kamala Harris. So I do think it's in bad taste, and it spits in the face of those who have been affected by it, whose lives have been affected by it,
And that are still
that are-
affected by it.
are still affected by it. So I totally understand his point. And I think like going into another lane, a lane that he chose not to go in. This is how I see this kind of jovial, nostalgic kind of take on their marijuana use. I see it more as pandering. You know what I'm saying? He didn't go into that lane, but I will. Like, I just see it more as pandering, and that's what I don't like. It's more of a function of these candidates and these representatives trying to increase their street cred.
No doubt.
And their
Humanize themselves.
their coolness.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
They're not just they're not like separate from any one of us. They're humans too. They do the same things that we do.
Like, but one thing that did that stood out to me that he did mention that I kind of like I completely forgot about is the whole public assistance thing. It's like a marijuana conviction preventing some people from gaining access to public assistance, and I was just like, that's amazing, considering the fact that there have been tons of representatives and presidents who have been convicted of DUIs, to me, which is much, much worse. But they are still considered viable candidates. They're still considered qualified. They're still considered morally qualified to run for office and hold office and make policies that deny people certain access for an offense like smoking weed.
Exactly. Cory Booker also talked about, and that was some of the, part of the video that we didn't show, but he talked about what he said, restorative justice. And he talked about the effort from many people to include people of color when you're talking about these dispensaries, you know, these people that are owning these marijuana operations. And as of right now, Senator Booker said that only about 2 to 3% are actually operated by people of color, and women that are in that field. It's less than that. So I agree with him. We talked about that with Cynthia Nixon in New York. She had an idea like that. And I think it's just, I guess it's apt because, like he said, disproportionately, people of color are impacted more so than white people. So when you see these dispensaries popping up, these operations popping up, and it's big business that is getting involved, it's a lot of white people that are getting involved, and people of color are not participating in it, yet they have been impacted the most by it, that rubs you the wrong way. I wish Cory Booker was a real dude. You know, this was a real perspective from Cory Booker. And he does have legislation addressing it. So maybe it is something that he actually feels like that is actually in his heart, and this is an actual ambition of his to do something about this. I don't know. I just wish that we would see that showcase itself in all areas, but we don't.